Sherry Sporn. I really enjoyed the thorough podcast you did on the RPF, but I have a question that you didn't cover. You said that many people didn't make it through and leave the Sea Org instead. How does that work? Is it like routing out or something else? Can they still be in Scientology? Great question, Sherry. Thank you for asking me this. And in fact, yes, they absolutely. Well, okay. Here's it depends as to whether they can, how they route out, and whether they can still stay in Scientology. Most can, but here's how it works. When you're on the RPF and you're already at the bottom rung of the ladder of Scientology, Sea Org. You are a scumbag, you got all this work to do, you got to get through this full program. And then you give up. You just go, no, I'm done. I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore, and I really want to leave. And you can do that. But there's a process you're going to have to follow, and it is called routing out. There's a route, a series of steps you have to do, and routing out means you're following the route out of the organization. And yes, there is such a thing as routing in. Like when you start the RPF, you route into it. This is Scientology's. So, and there are routing forms with pieces of paper that lay out step by step what the path or route or steps you have to take in order to get something done. Okay, so routing out of the RPF basically means that you go to what is called the RPF's RPF. And I didn't talk about this really at all. There is a whole issue on it. The RPF's RPF is when you're in treason to the RPF, right? You can be in a worse condition than being in the RPF, and that is being in the RPF's RPF. And basically, the RPF's RPF, or RZAR, as it has been even shortened down even more, the RZAR, that's what we called it, the RZAR. And I was on the RZAR for a week because I had a twin. I was working with somebody who originated wanting to leave the Sea Org. He was done. We had spent a year. When I did my podcast last week, I didn't really talk about my RPF a lot. I talked about certain anecdotes, but it wasn't a breakdown of my program. It was a breakdown of the overall program. So I'll tell you that when I did the RPF, the first twin that I had was a guy I had known outside the RPF and the Sea Org. We got along, and we spent about a year working together on something that ended up being a complete waste of time, as though all of it is not a complete waste of time. But even within the world of Scientology, we were doing something that was later considered completely unnecessary and wrong, and it was a year that we spent screwing around with that. And I won't get into the details of it other than to tell you that. So he ended up like, okay, I just want to get out of here now. I'm done with this, and this isn't going anywhere. And I wasn't feeling so great either, but I still wanted to get through the program. So when one of the twin ship wants to leave, both twins are going to go to the RZAR. And the person who wants to leave is going to have to get a little handling, maybe a little sec check for leaving, where sort of, major questions are asked. Are you leaving the Sea Org over and overt? Are you leaving the Sea Org with an undisclosed, withhold? Is there something you've done, in the Sea Org that you're getting away with, or that someone nearly found out? They ask these kind of broad questions as sec check questions. And if you want a real thorough breakdown of sec checking and what that's all about, that's also in that RPF podcast. Okay, so you're going to be asked sharp and pointed questions, but the idea is to kind of get you out of there. Like, they don't want people languishing on the RZAR for, too long. But at the same time, it depends on the situation and context and time, because I did see people languishing on the RZAR for a very long time in a couple cases. Just, nope, not interested, don't really want to move forward, not really interested in doing anything. And remember, if you watch that podcast, I mentioned how some people who are at the state of OT need to wait for an OT twin to show up and can't really do much with the program. Well, there was one guy who ended up on the RZAR who was an OT, who didn't really want to do the program, but they really wouldn't let him leave. He was just kind of sitting on the fence, and they never really would let him go over the edge. They kind of held on to him, and he never really got enough gumption up to say, "Okay, I'm done. Get me out of here." His wife was on the RPF. She was encouraging him to stay and get through it, even though there was nobody for him to work with for a very long time. So he was sitting languishing around on the RSR. But generally speaking, that's the path out of the RPF. Now, if you, and it's a usual sort of route. So like I said, you get a sec check, you get a little cleanup, and then they send you on your way. And they want to make sure that you're not going to go out there and badmouth the Sea Org or badmouth Scientology. And they don't particularly expect to see you for a while. But they, in fact, they probably won't want to even see you for a while. But they will let you go. Now, if you are one of those people who ended up on the RPF because it was either you're going to get declared a suppressive if you don't do this RPF program that we're ordering you to do, or you can leave so you can leave the Sea Org and get declared, or you do the RPF, right? Not much of a choice when it comes to, being in the Scientology mindset and getting declared, losing all your friends, potentially your family, etc. So in those cases, if the guy gets on the RPF and then says, "Okay, I'm really sick of this, I want to leave," and he ends up on the RSR and wants to leave, he'll get declared. That still is going to happen to that person. And I saw instances of that. In fact, right when I arrived on the RPF, there were a couple people who were on their way out and had been, were getting declared. So, so that would happen. But otherwise, if you're not one of those people, nobody's going to really think twice about missing you or thinking about you or anything like that because you're on the RPF. The Sea Org is pretty much almost given up on you. And they're not waiting with bated breath for you to get through the RPF. You're over there just, doing your program, and nobody's really thinking or seeing you or thinking about you too much. So if you leave from that, it's not particularly some big, huge surprise to them because a lot of people leave the RPF through the RPF. So anyway, that's kind of how that goes. If you end up wanting to stay, or if you go to the RSR and then you want to get back, like I did, okay, so I go to the RSR, my twin's going to leave, he gets his thing and off he goes. I have to do lower conditions, the liability formula, the make up the damage and, atone to the group in some fashion, prove that you're worthy to be back in the group. That's what the liability thing is. So I had to do those condition formulas. I had to write them up. That's why I make this little hand motion. And I did treason, enemy, doubt, and liability, which are these Scientology lower condition steps. They're steps that you take in order to prove that you're a loyal group member. And I think I made something in the mill for the RPF itself. There's a library room in the RPF where they have all the Hubbard's references and books and stuff like that. And I think I made a cabinet or something for that space. And that was my make up the damage for, ending up on the RSR in the first place. And then I had to take that around and get the signature of all the people who are on the RPF and get them to approve me being back on the program. And everybody was okay, cool. He's one of the good guys. He's here to get through the program, So I did that. And then I spent another 2 years with another twin getting through the program. So, so that was my experience with that. And there you go.